Well, here we go. This is one I've been looking forward to, TJ. And, this came about real fast because I only recently found out that this movie was again available for us to talk about. And I know I'm excited because it was your first time. And the movie we're going to talk about is To Live and Die in L.A. from 1985, directed by William Friedken, who I'm a big fan of his movies. And, going back to things like The French Connection and Ronin with Robert De Niro, which is a great action movie, and a whole bunch of stuff along the way. So it was fun for me to watch this movie again for a whole bunch of reasons. And now, it's not a movie you've seen. It's an old movie, from 1985, as we said. Oh, and by the way, listener, viewer, whoever is tuning into this, spoiler alert, okay? If there is a big spoiler in this movie, and we are going to disclose it. If you don't want the spoiler spoiled for you, pause here, go watch the movie, and then come back, okay? So, TJ, take us away.
Well, I would gather from your bubbling enthusiasm that you were not disappointed by watching this movie for the first time. And how many years has it been? Since it was in the theaters?
I saw it in the movie theaters in 1985.
Yeah. And haven't seen it since?
I don't recall having seen it since.
Okay. So It's not unusual for someone to see a beloved movie 40 years after they'd last seen it and think, maybe this isn't all that. Or it's also possible for somebody to see it and say, it's flawed, but I will never stop loving it. And it's also possible for somebody to say, it's just as good as I remember it being. I defend it 100%. Which of those three are you?
I loved it even more. And
even more. Okay.
Even more.
Option 4. Okay.
And so I'll tell you, look, this is a movie that has sort of a polarized reception, right? Roger Ebert gave it 4 stars out of 4, raved about it. A lot of other critics really ripped it apart for a variety of reasons. It is a very stylized movie. It is the acting is uneven. It's not hugely plausible. But I freaking loved it, man. I loved everything about it. I loved the cinematography. I loved the tension. I loved the story. I loved the soundtrack. Okay. It for me, I even watched it twice, in order to, prepare for this. So
you didn't mind doing that at all.
I did not. So let's hear your reaction. Okay. I'm getting the sense you're not as big a fan as I am.
Well, it didn't blow my mind, but I really enjoyed it. Like as we said, I hadn't seen it before. I have seen very few William Friedken movies. I've seen The French Connection, which I haven't seen that in a good long time. I'm due to rewatch that. And I've seen The Exorcist, which I rewatched a year or two ago and loved, even though horror movies are not my thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then he had a pretty uneven career after that.
Oh, absolutely.
Like he went from being the darling, Oscar-winning, box office smash directing, to then directing some bombs, and then kind of, I don't know, maybe it's too much to say faded into obscurity, but he wasn't one of the darlings of the 70s scene that went on to have careers like Steven Spielberg or Martin Scorsese or anything like that.
Right.
But anyway, as you described, there are elements of it that are incredibly dated, and yet I didn't find myself cringing at any of those elements.
Right.
I found myself fascinated by something I do want us to talk about in this podcast, which is just the open-armed embrace of all things 80s that seemed to characterize so much of the 80s.
Yes.
And, you and I have 11 years between us to the day, so you were in a different position to appreciate that than I was at that age. So in 1985, that was the year that I turned 11.
Yeah.
So I wasn't quite as dialed into what was going on. And I knew that movie existed, because I read the entertainment pages of the newspaper every day.
Yeah.
But there's no way I would have been allowed to see it.
Right.
And then it was also such a modest success that when it came out on video, I never saw it. Right. And I never felt like I was left out by not, it's not a movie people reference anymore. It doesn't show up in memes. It doesn't get referenced for good or bad.
Right.
So all that's to say, I definitely enjoyed it, but it clearly didn't impact me the way it did you.
Yes. And I think you're onto something here, right? Like, people always say you kind of, your musical taste sort of freezes, somewhere in high school, right? And, you kind of keep going back to that stuff, or maybe your early 20s or whatever. So yes, in 1985, I was 22 years old. Okay. And it was the 80s, and the 80s were a different time, right? People who, don't remember the 80s or didn't live through them. It was it was an age of excess and, excitement and energy, right? I mean, it was a really, really interesting time. And, at 22 years old, man, you're coming into, kind of this exploratory part of your life, right? Where you're, tasting everything and experiencing everything, right? So yeah, so rewatching the movie not only was for me getting to re-experience one of the all-time great car chases. I mean, I cannot think of a better car chase than that one, quite frankly, right? I think it blows away Bullet. I think it blows away the French Connection. I have seen that multiple times, in the fairly recent years. The Bourne Identity had some really nice car chases, but I don't think there's better than anyone as
The Blues Brothers?
the Blues Brothers. Great. I mean, I haven't seen it in years. It was great, but for me, just
but it's comedic.
Comedic, exactly. This was, oh my God, we're going to die, right? And if the character, the Secret Service agent Vukovich riding in the back, because William Peterson did a lot of the driving in that, and the other actor in the back who is looking like he is going to, throw up and have a heart attack and all of the above, really was experiencing that because he was scared to death in the back of that car, right? And so for me, that was just one of those things where I'm like, oh my God, this is intense. So anyway, so yes, and you're right. This was so freaking 80s, man. I mean, from the clothes to the the music. I mean, boy, it does not get any more 80s than Wang Chung, right? And
I didn't know that Wang Chung had scored a movie. Like that sounds like something a comedian would come up with.
Exactly, because they had that, a couple of big hits, right? Back in the 80s that were really quite annoying, to be honest with you, right? I mean, everybody Wang Chung tonight. I mean, oh my God, I want to poke my ears out when I hear that, right? Or Dance Hall Days. Get out of here, But this, and the thing about the soundtrack is that whenever it comes on, it just so dominates, right? I mean, it just takes over everything and sets this tone. And you're like, wow, where is this coming from? And so I mean, I'm giddy talking about it, right? Go ahead.
So do you have any idea why the 80s were like that?
So oh boy, the 80s was an interesting time in that, okay, so every decade is a reaction to the decade before, okay? And so you go from, the 60s where it's rebelling against the 50s and it's this sort of, you know, peace, love, understanding, you're celebrating youth culture, all this sort of stuff, hope I die before I get old, kind of mindset, right? And then the 70s, there's this, the disco era takes over and there's this corporatizing of the arts in a way, right? Now, a lot of great movies, a lot of great alternative stuff that way, but there was also this sort of stripping the soul out of things in a lot of ways, okay, to some extent. Now, the 80s come along, okay? And so on the one hand, you're getting this sort of punk reaction to the saccharine qualities of the 70s, right? So you're getting these, hardcore bands coming up like Black Flag and, the Ramones even, which, to think of the Ramones as hardcore now is almost laughable, but it was this rebellion and this like, in your face sort of thing. But you also had the cocaine era. You had the Reagan era of, hey man, make money, spend it, get high, have fun, have sex, do this, do that, and it was this age of decadence, quite frankly, right? And it was before the age of the cell phone. right? It was before the age of carrying a camera in your pocket. It was kind of the last era where you could get away with anything you wanted, quite frankly, and you weren't going to end up on Instagram, right? So, so it was it was this wonderful, magical time, TJ, you know, and, and when you watch that movie, you kind of get this tension between the rough industrial underbelly with this sophisticated, polished, wannabe sort of environment, right? And you get this clash of country club versus refinery almost, right? Which I think really captured that. So I don't know. For me, it was just a time of life being a banquet, right? That you could eat from and without guilt. Now, it didn't mean that you didn't have a huge headache the next day, right? And I think the movie proves that out, right? That these things come at a price. Okay. Why don't we talk a little bit about the movie first, okay? Kind of set it up because we've been jumping into, me rhapsodizing about my youth here. So the movie Live and Die in L.A. Is directed by William Friedken, like you talked about, who is an interesting director. And I don't know if you've seen the documentary about him that's out there, but clearly a Type 8. And I think one of the reasons why his career wasn't what it could have been is because he's an asshole. He was an asshole, right? I mean, he was just just a really, really tough, opinionated kind of guy who apparently was pretty tough to work with, right? But he had come across this book actually that got to him before it was published, called "To Live and Die in L.A." by a Secret Service agent at the time. And geez, I didn't write his name down here, or I did. Do you have the author's name by any chance? So it's Gerard Pitovich or something like that, right? So anyway, they turned it into a screenplay, and they start making this movie for about $8 million, which is not no money, but it's a really, really small budget, right? And so it's
for a major director.
But yes,
The Exorcist was one of the highest grossing movies ever.
Yes. So this is a big guy, and they really had to scrape up, some money to do this. And it shows in that every scene is filmed on location, right? I mean, I don't think there's a sound stage in this movie. And a lot of it was really shot guerrilla style, right? I mean, the chase through the airport, for example, they really pissed off the security because they were breaking all the rules that they told them they were going to follow. The car chase, you can tell, I mean, was real. It wasn't kind of filmed without permits, but it was really done, on the I'll say on the cheap, right? From what I read, they would be able to shoot 4 hours at a time. Right? They could close down the highways for 4 hours at a time. So, anyway, so Secret Service agent Richard Chance loses his partner Jimmy Hart when Hart is murdered while investigating counterfeiter Rick Masters, played by a very young Willem Dafoe. Okay. We'll come back and certainly talk about him more. Driven by vengeance, Chance and his new partner John Vukovich pursue Masters, but face roadblocks gathering evidence through legal channels. When they can't get official funds for a sting operation, Chance convinces Vukovich to help him rob a criminal to get the necessary money. This leads to a dangerous wrong-way freeway chase, and unknown to them, results in the death of an FBI agent. Using the stolen money, they set up an undercover operation to catch Masters. However, the sting goes tragically wrong when Chance is unexpectedly killed. Vukovich, who began as Chance's straight-laced partner, completes his transformation by adopting his dead partner's ruthless methods to bring Masters to justice.
Hang on, Johnny! Oh! Get out of the way! You push too hard. You take it too personally.
The point is that we're partners, right?
Sure we are.
You're in the wrong place at the wrong time.
I want to get Rick Masters.
You're not the first agents to get next to Masters.
He killed my partner, man. I'm gonna bag Masters, and I don't give a shit how I do it.
I hear you.
Set up a meeting.
You shouldn't have done it.
Got something for you.
What, so now you want to commit a robbery?
I'm worried!
You're beautiful.
Show me where you print and testify against him in open court.
You can't do this to me!
Now, I just jumped right over the big, the big, the big giveaway there, right? So we're going to come back to that. But this is one of the things about this movie. It was like, wait a minute, man. The main actor just got shot in the face with a shotgun, right? So anyway.
And that was years and years before Game of Thrones killed off the protagonist in the first season.
Yes. Yes.
Nobody killed the protagonist in the 80s.
Yes.
That did not happen.
Yes. And now it happens towards the end of the movie, but still, I remember in the theater when that happened, I was like, you got to be kidding me. Did that really just happen? I mean,
and it's unambiguous. It's not like he gets shot and we see him crumple over and maybe it's just a wound. Oh no, he got shot in the forehead. He's dead.
With
he
a
doesn't have death throes.
Yes.
Yeah. He doesn't have dying words. He's just like, gone.
Yes. And it happens so quickly, right? I mean, it's just all of us, they're making this, they're starting to arrest these guys, and then all of a sudden they're shooting at each other and boom, he's dead, Anyway, the character Vukovich, who is the partner, who is terrified throughout this movie, right? He gets dragged into this, he does not want to be breaking the law. He does not want to be doing these things that Chance has
bending the rules, even.
Right. And,
much less breaking the law.
Exactly. Right. He wants to follow procedures and so forth. Right. But he ends up at the end of the movie basically transforming into Vukovich. I'm sorry, not Vukovich, into Chance. Right.
Full shades and all.
Yeah. So, but we'll come back to the ending because I do want to talk about that. The main characters here. All right, so we mentioned Willem Dafoe. Willem Dafoe plays the main bad guy. A year earlier, he had been in a movie called Streets of Fire, directed by Walter Hill. You ever see that movie?
No.
Okay. Another fascinating artifact of the 80s. Okay. If you ever have a good 90 minutes or so, with absolutely nothing else to do, check out Streets of Fire. It's fascinating, not a great movie. In fact, it was a huge bomb and, it did not help Walter Hill's career. But Willem Dafoe plays this chilling bad guy in that. And he plays a pretty chilling bad guy in this one, too. I think he's very, very effective in this role. Okay. We'll come back and talk about Enneagram type in a minute. The main character, Richard Chance, is played by William Peterson, who starred in Manhunter and CSI later on. He was, he kind of disappeared. I thought, particularly after seeing him in those two movies, that he would have had a really big career because I thought he was so good in Manhunter and I thought he was fantastic in this. And then he just kind of disappeared, right?
And he has the look.
Yeah.
He was Mr. Handsome leading man, as well as a genuinely good actor and an action guy.
Yeah.
Although he's not an action guy in Manhunter. Like, his weapon in that is his mind.
Right.
But still, like, he looks the part.
Yes. And I don't know what happened, but, he just kind of disappeared for years until making it big on the TV show. Let's see. John Vukovich, played by John Pankow, who was probably better known for being on that TV series with Helen Hunt and Paul Reiser.
Mad About You.
Mad About You, yes. So played a very different kind of character on that. But again, not a big star, right? And
Stage guy.
More of a stage guy? Okay.
Yeah.
And then the main female character is Ruth Lanier, played by Darlene Flugel, who had a super hot moment in the 80s around that time. If you've ever seen the Billy Crystal, Gregory Hines movie Running Scared with Jimmy Smits and Joe Pantoliano, she plays the Billy Crystal's ex-wife in that. And she also went in to be the lead female character in Crime Story with Dennis Farina, and which was the kind of the Miami Vice, follow-up for Michael Mann back in the day on TV. And she did a couple other small things and then just kind of disappeared. But she was, for a real hot moment in the 80s, she was a big deal. Critical reception, like I said, some people loved it, some people hated it. The guy that I went to see it with in the theater, I remember very well. We walked out and he said, "That's the worst thing I've ever seen in my life." And I said, "I freaking love that," So, we were a good sample of critics for the period. So,
one more actor to mention, Dean Stockwell plays the role of Bob Grimes. So Dean Stockwell is probably best known for his role in Quantum Leap, but he's got an incredible career. He was in Paris, Texas, and he was in the 1962 film of great play, Long Day's Journey into Night. Talk about bread in a career.
Yes, also Married to the Mob. He was the main bad guy in Married to the Mob as well.
So he's just always good. Whenever he shows up in something, you just know, if nothing else is good in this movie, scenes with him are going to be good.
Although I'm fully convinced that in this movie, he was stoned out of his mind when he was doing his scenes. I mean, and that would have been fitting for that time. I don't know exactly what his story was, but I know he did have a period where he kind of, ran into some trouble and, disappeared for a while. A couple other little cameos that we'll point out. So first of all, Robert Downey Sr., is Chance's partner who gets blown away in the beginning. So it's nice to see an early piece with him. And then for all the fans of Frasier out there, the woman who played Jane Leeves, who played, what was her name? The physical therapist for Frasier's father. She has a very small role in this as a very different character from the one in Frasier, we'll say. So tell me more about some of your reactions to the movie, TJ. I've been kind of ball hogging here. So,
yeah, well, I remember a conversation that we had on a previous podcast when we weren't recording, where you and Russ talked about Friedken possibly being an 8. I don't know his body of work. I've never seen interviews with him. I don't know much about him. So I'm just taking that on faith. But watching this movie, the strongest impression I got looking through the lens of the Enneagram was an 8-ish vibe overall.
Yeah.
In terms of some of the things you've already mentioned. Los Angeles is an incredibly romanticized city. It really depends on how it's filmed, because in this movie, we see the grit. We see just how strong petroleum, at the time at least, was an industry there. Not only are there a lot of oil refineries, there's derricks bobbing on the skyline, and a number of shots, and the way it's set up, they're kind of silhouetted against the setting sun.
Right.
There's just no mistaking.
Right.
This is not a movie that takes place in Beverly Hills or on Rodeo Drive.
Right.
There are some palm trees, but there's a warehouse in the desert is where the counterfeiting's happening. And that's in the opening scene. There's a scene in a topless bar, which looks pretty seedy. There's the freeway chase, and which eventually takes us through the canals, mostly dry canals.
Yeah.
But it's this is not a beautiful place.
Right.
So that seemed really 8-ish to me of let's not bullshit about where we are or what life is like here.
Yeah.
And also, there's beauty in the roughness of looking at this isn't a matter of looking down on it.
Right.
We're saying that this is a horrible place that should be raised, but more just check out the grit.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's be in the grit.
This is classic noir, right? I mean, this is kind of bright colored Miami Vice on noir in a sense, right?
80s noir.
Yeah, 80s noir. And
Pastel.
Yeah, exactly, right? Lots of oranges,
Yeah.
for example, and lots of even like kind of lime greens in the title sequences and that sort of thing. And
more scenes shot during the day than at night.
yes,
Like a lot of daylight, a lot of natural light.
yes, and so absolutely a darkness and a grittiness to it, but almost, as you say, kind of almost an affection toward it. I think that's my fault more so than yours, but it's like, so Friedkin is almost saying, I love this because it's dark. It reminds me of that Stephen Crane, poem about the monster, eating its heart. And he says, why are you eating its heart? He says, I'm eating it because it's my heart and it tastes good, kind of thing, right? It's just like this rawness to it that is a sign of vitality almost.
Right. Yeah, totally. This embrace.
Yes.
Like, let me get in there with the grit. Let me taste it.
Yes.
Tastes fucking great. Not everyone's going to like it, but I do.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me about I've been dying to know your reaction to the soundtrack.
Oh, again, just so dated, like unapologetically, which Friedkin wasn't coming into his own at this point. He was, as we've talked about, a very established filmmaker. So it's just fascinating me to have been a little kid in that era and to have had the kids' embrace of what's new and what's popular, as well as the overall 80s embrace. To see that would have worked for him. He would have been, I don't know, in his 40s at that point making this movie. I'm just like, let's make this as 80s sounding as possible. A bit of trivia I read was that he reached out to Miles Davis to do the soundtrack.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
That would have been a very different take on it. I mean, I imagine Miles Davis would have been making different music in the 80s as he made in the 50s or 60s or 70s, but still. Anyway, but I thought it really worked. I thought it was just like, there's just no denying that this is a movie about the 80s.
Yeah. And it's funny because pretty much everything in it is by Wang Chung, who, listeners, if you don't know who Wang Chung is, you got to find out, because it just puts context on this conversation that we're having this conversation about Wang Chung, in 2025. And, but it is such a in your face, I'm here, I'm all that. I don't care what you think, kind of music to it. And somewhere, it might have been on the album cover, because I had the album on vinyl, right, from the soundtrack. And I think that there's this long essay by Friedkin talking about the genius of Wang Chung, and how, that the movie could not have been what it was without their brilliance, their symphonic brilliance, and, Beethoven-like genius of music and all this stuff. It's awesome to read. So, and then towards the end, there's this 30-second clip of a song that feels like it could have been like at the end of the Karate Kid or one of the Rocky movies, or one of these, like, again, real 80s hair band celebration, the end of a movie kind of thing. And then all of a sudden it ends. And then it's back to the Wang Chung stuff again, for the last 5 minutes of the movies or so. And it's almost like the end of the movie is kind of, it's after Chance has been killed. It's after the whole thing is sort of resolved. And you kind of get this fake sense that, oh, okay, a new day is coming, right? Life is going to be good now. But Vukovich shows up at Ruth's home. She's about to get out of town. She thinks, okay, I'm home free. I'm going to get safe, be away from all these people. And then comes to find out that she's pulled right back into the web, and she's not getting out of this underbelly that we're talking about. And the ending where Vukovich basically tells her, no, you're not going anywhere. Now you're my snitch, right? Now you're my, girl. And she looks at him. He looks at her. She looks at him. She sees Chance, right? Prior to the shotgun blast to the face. Okay. Then they switch to the two of them having sex, Chance, and her. And then they switch to Chance pulling up in his pickup at the end. And that's where the movie ends. Any interpretation of that?
If anything, it's just kind of emphasizing what we talked about, which is that Vukovich has become Chance.
Yes.
that even though his body is dead, his spirit, his way of doing things lives on proudly as ever. And maybe it's also a way of saying, wasn't he magnificent? Sure, he died. Sure, he died in a way that was basically his own doing.
Yeah.
He played hard. He paid the price.
Yes.
But good on him for it.
So, yeah, I think it was this idea of, you know what, nobody gets out of here alive, right? And it's, things perpetuate themselves. It's kind of an existential statement, right, about the futility and meaninglessness of things. There's another alternative explanation that's very fitting with the mid-'80s, and it's cocaine. Right. I mean, it's just, it's just somebody, as they were thinking, how do we end this movie? They just sat and did a big bag of Coke and came up with that. And that's kind of where it ended. So I don't know which of those contributed to the decision on the ending, but it's a head scratcher. All right. Let's put some Enneagram in here. Okay. Let's start with William Peterson's character of Chance. Thoughts on his type?
3 was my guess.
3, really? Oh,
yeah.
Interesting. Uh-huh.
I could easily picture Tom Cruise playing that role in a very similar way. 8 occurred to me as a possibility as well. Like, I can see it going either way, but he's Mr. Cool 80s guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he's really proficient, and he bends the rules for his own purposes, although that could be very 8 as well, but also deceptive and secretive.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. That's good. So I hadn't thought of 3. I was going back and forth between 8 and 7. Right. And the 7 with just this sort of manic energy that he had. Okay. There's the base jumping, for example, off the bridge. After the car chase, and he goes back to Ruth's apartment, and she said, "How did it go?" And he's like, swimmingly. It couldn't have gone better. It went perfect, and it was a gigantic disaster, right? And he's so excited and so happy, and he starts talking about basketball and all this sort of stuff, right? It was just so kind of crazy. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, for me, honestly, it wasn't a tight character. So I could see, I could see 3, I could see 7, I could kind of see 8. I would probably lean toward a transmitting 7, but I wouldn't fight over it. So I clearly transmitting. I'll say that. Okay. So
yeah, agreed.
All right.
Yeah, and I guess just to extrapolate that a little, as a transmitter, he wants to make an impact.
Yes.
The rules are in the way. Fuck the rules.
Yes.
And he's in the Secret Service. He's not going to get famous from doing this, but he still wants to assert his will on how things should be.
Yes.
I will get this guy. I will get this counterfeiter by hook or by crook.
Yes. And let's see what else. Yeah, I mean, just his swagger, right? I mean, especially early in the movie, right, when he's, they're having the going away party for his partner, and just he's got the cowboy boots and the football jersey, and he's just full of swagger and strut and peacock. So he's even wearing a scarf at one point, like I think early on there, over the football jersey and stuff. So.
Yeah, he's the cock of the walk. And he knows it.
Yes, he is. All right, great. All right, so here's the good one. Willem Dafoe's character, Rick Masters. So Rick Masters is an artist and a counterfeiter, right? And a ruthless guy. Okay, so he's got, I don't know so he's got a girlfriend or something who is I guess would say a dancer. I'm really not sure what that theater performance was all about, through that movie, but seemed like kind of a dancer. And again, I think his cover was being a fairly well-known artist, and that was cover for being a counterfeiter. Thoughts on the Rick Masters character?
8.
Oh, you think so, huh? Uh-huh.
Yeah. I could be influenced by the fact that it's Willem Dafoe, who doesn't always play 8s, but when he does, they really pop as 8s.
Yeah.
I was reminded of the movie Thief, in that in Thief, the James Caan character is a safecracker.
Yeah.
And we see extended sequences of him cracking a safe. Like, how long does it take to weld your way into a safe? Let's show that whole process. Very much like this movie opens with an extended sequence of how does one counterfeit American currency? Here's how. Let's take you through it. And it's long and he does it carefully. He does it professionally, but it's like how to do something. Now, that could be more Friedken being an 8 than the character being an 8. Mm-hmm. But as you described, he's incredibly ruthless as well.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't hesitate to pull the trigger on someone when he needs to.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was my guess.
Okay. So on the counterfeiting thing, they did hire somebody like who was professional, for counterfeiting, and some of the money actually got into circulation, and they were supposed to destroy it and destroyed most of it. And I think one of the staff's sons tried to buy candy with it or something, so it was, this was an interesting story about that. And Willem Dafoe did learn how to do it, but they said that in some of the scenes, you can't see Dafoe's face. It was actually the professional advisor who was doing it. So here's my theory.
They didn't have to do that, just to throw that in. A movie where the villain's a counterfeiter, there's no reason he can't just show up with a bag full of counterfeit cash, and that's that. And we just take it for granted that he did whatever counterfeiters do to make that money.
Yeah, and what was cool about it is that even though they showed the whole process, they didn't explain it, right?
Yeah.
Like the poker chips, for example, right? The bag of poker chips in the dryer, they didn't make a big deal of why the hell are there poker chips in the dryer, right? I mean, everybody kind of knew, what they do, why they do it, and why poker chips were, a piece of evidence and, that sort of thing. So I really appreciated that they didn't, they didn't dumb it down for people. Okay. But here's my premise. Here's my take on that character. I think he's a preserving force. Right?
Oh.
Yeah. I think that, if you follow me, and now clearly, yes, he's ruthless, right? I mean, he's a killer. But I think everything about him pointed to elegance and refinement and like some depth that he was wrestling with, his artwork, for example, that he would take in, and then the burning of the artwork in the beginning, he kind of does these paintings and pins them to the wall and burns them. And so there was this, one of the things that I see in preserving fours is this focus on refinement and elegance in their environment, right? This treating life as a work of art. And I think that's what Masters was all about, right? I mean, even if you look at the way he dressed early on, right? There's this first scene where we see him where he's wearing this, very stylized purplish shirt, almost looked like a kimono top in a way, and his attire was very interesting. I mean, even for the 80s, it was stuff that stood out and was different, right? The car he drove, whereas say Chance is driving this big pickup, he's driving this black Ferrari, right? And, really slick and polished and, and I rate the character as a preserving force. So, I don't know, reaction to that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of validity in that. I'd want to see it again with that in mind.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the fact that he's a genuine visual artist.
Yes.
Not that automatically makes somebody a 4.
Right.
But like they emphasize what a part of his life that is.
Yes. Yeah, and there was also,
I guess you could see his counterfeiting as an artful form of crime.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it takes a lot of skill to do that and to do it well.
Yeah. 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 It was, for me, he just, I remember the scene. So the lawyer tries to rip them off, Max, and so they go in and make him open the safe. And, let's see, the lawyer kind of reaches in why Masters is not looking, and he hits him with the African statue, right? Hits him in the head, and he's reaching into there to get a gun, and the girl yells, "He's reaching for something, Rick," and then Masters, Willem Dafoe takes out his gun, shoots him in the crotch, right? And then he stands up while the guy's writhing around in agony, and he picks up the statue, and he looks at it, and he says, 18th century Cameroon, Max, your taste is in your ass. And then he hits him with it and kills him.
Yeah, that's pretty foolish. Wonder if he would have let him live if it had been a tasteful statue.
That's right. Yeah. 18th century Cameroon. Your taste is in your ass. So.
You disgust me.
So yeah, that's where I'm kind of leaning for this character, which is one of the things that is just, again, so cool about this movie, right? I mean, where else would you see, a preserving for as the villain? So
yeah, they're not often villains.
Yeah, good. Let's see. Now, again, only limited characters in this movie. One of the other ones was John Vukovich, Chance's partner. Thoughts on his Enneagram type?
Possibly a 6. As you mentioned, he spends a lot of the movie scared, distressed, or racked with guilt.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's a good soldier, wants to play by the rules, and then is really discombobulated by a partner who bends or breaks the rules.
Yeah.
Then, spoiler we haven't mentioned is that they shoot a courier to get money that they need to buy the counterfeit, who turns out to be an undercover FBI agent. They don't actually shoot him. They rob him. And then the support guys, who at the time we don't know either, fire with a sniper rifle, which kills them. But then, they are responsible for the death of an FBI agent. And he just starts sweating bullets over that.
Yes.
And goes and consults with a lawyer and is like, look, what are my options?
Yeah.
If I confess, if I testify, what's going to happen to me? If I throw my partner under the bus? He's really weighing this, which seemed pretty six-ish to me too, of like, on this hand, but on the other hand.
Right. Right. Yeah, I would agree. It seemed like a 6-ish character for, the reasons you're describing. And, again, it's, you can see all the 6 stuff there, but he's not a complete punk, right? I mean, we again, the stereotype of the 6 tends to be the Woody Allen kind of thing, right? Where,
the neurotic, terrified, jumping at their own shadow.
Exactly. Right. And that's not, what we have here. He's clearly somebody who's, pretty tough guy, by, normal standards. He's just a bit.
He's in the Secret Service.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And, and he, despite all the fear and anxiety he's experiencing during the car chase, which I think anybody might, he, ends up being a pretty tough guy.
The detail about that is in that car chase, at one point they drive, or Chance drives the wrong way on a freeway ramp, and then is driving through opposing traffic for quite a while. And in the backseat, Vukovich keeps yelling, "Get out of the way!" As if anyone's going to hear that. But he yells it a bunch of times.
Yeah.
Like some terrified guy in the back seat. I guess we'd better get out of the way then.
Yeah. Did you notice in the on the freeway scene that the traffic is all on the wrong side of the road? Right.
I saw that in the trivia. I didn't notice it when I watched it.
I noticed it. I didn't pick it up the first time, and then I saw it in the trivia. And as I watched it, I'm like, I'll be darned, it is. So it's I don't know why they did that. I think they said it was just easier to film or something, or it might have just visually looked better or something for the filming. But anyway, just a weird sort of thing. It's almost like they were all of a sudden in England.
There's a scene in Pretty Woman where the Richard Gere character takes the Julia Roberts character to San Francisco on a private jet to go to the opera. And the way it's filmed, and I just saw this in trivia, the way it's filmed is you can see the setting sun behind the plane as it's flying to San Francisco. And people have pointed out that that would be correct if they were flying from north to south. But when you're watching it, how many people are going to catch that? And it must have looked better in that moment.
I think so.
It's like, let's just do it. So the same thing. It was like cars on this side.
Yeah. If
people notice this while it's happening, I'm not doing my job right, because I want their hearts to be in their throat. And as you said before, this is one of the most amazing car chase scenes I've ever seen. And I also want to point out that I never hear it referenced about that. When I hit play, I had no idea there was going to be a car chase in this movie. It doesn't have a legend around it.
Right.
French Connection does.
Yes.
And Friedken blatantly said he wanted to outdo French Connection. And he did.
He did. And he said, if it doesn't outdo the French Connection, it's not going in. which is huge because it was the most expensive part of the filming, I'm sure, right? For, what they had to do. Yeah, I agree. And I think, and Friedkin did say that this was his favorite of his movies. So go figure. The only other character I think that, has any real, I don't know, enough time to have a thought on, it would be Ruth, the Darlene Flugel character, who is kind of an informant who's sort of being blackmailed, to inform for chance. He's kind of using her for sex and information and all this other sort of stuff.
She spent time in prison, so he often holds that over her head. Like, unless you do what I want, then I'll have your parole revoked.
Yes.
So she's trapped in her role. Yeah. And her day job is working the desk at the topless bar that we mentioned before.
Right. That was very,
charges admission to people who come in.
Yes. And there is a sex scene in this where clearly they did not have an intimacy coordinator. It was, before all that sort of stuff happened. It's a pretty raw, pretty brutal, scene. So be prepared for that, watcher. From what I saw, the direction from Friedkin was just make it as real as possible. Well, there you go.
Accomplished.
So any thoughts on her Enneagram type? I don't know. Just pick anything up?
Best guess I have is 3.
Yeah.
Like, again, she's the cool 80s lady. She looks great, always. She's secretive. As an informant, she goes undercover a lot.
Yeah.
And does that seamlessly. Like, she never gets detected for it. Yeah. Vukovic confronts her at the end saying, you knew that the guy that was carrying that money was an FBI. She denies it, but still, that throws some doubt into our minds as the viewer of, like, was she a double agent or a triple agent or playing both sides against each other to get her own needs met? Again, not that threes have a monopoly on that. Yeah. But if I had to field a guess, that would be my guess.
I would think so too. It was, and again, it goes to show that not every 3 is, legally blonde, success oriented sort of person, right? You could be a 3 and, still be in some pretty tricky and, kind of, I don't know, grungy sort of environments, right? But that strategy still sort of comes out, just in a different way.
Totally.
Yeah.
How do I survive? How do I excel in my situation, which in her situation is as an ex-con with very limited options.
Yeah.
Under the thumb of a Secret Service guy. Now what do I do?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to look great. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm going to get the job done.
Yeah. And she, again, just a super 80s actress / character, right? I mean, again, there's no way to look at her. The haircut, just, everything about her for me just kind of screamed 80s.
But not laughably so.
No.
Like, doesn't have like teased hair or full of hair products. Her makeup wasn't overdone.
Right.
Like, she still looks really good. Like, she doesn't, like, if somebody were dressing up for an 80s themed party, they probably wouldn't look like her.
Right. Right. It's not the big haired, broad shoulder pad, stereotype of what was the working girl is kind of the stereotype of the 80s look.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. But this is what women really looked like in the 80s. Okay. As somebody who, was there, right? I mean, that's,
and dating.
And dating. Yeah. I mean, yes, she looked like a number of the women that I dated back in those days. So, she was certainly on the more attractive side of, women I dated. She was a very attractive woman. So anyway, other thoughts about To Live and Die in LA we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah. Just to build on something I said earlier about the gritty look at LA, it's also a really gritty look at crime fighting. Yeah. So as we mentioned, agents get shot and killed. We see blood. And as we talked about, death isn't romantic. It's sudden. Yeah. It's not glorious. It's just brutal and blah. Oh, they're gone.
Yeah.
There's a number of times where someone gets kicked in the nuts.
Yeah.
So there's no honor in fighting.
We forgot to mention John Turturro.
John Turturro.
Right. Speaking of getting kicked in the nuts, right? Yeah. He's got a great short role in this. It was quite fantastic. So.
Never seen him give a bad performance.
Yeah. All right. So go ahead. The grittiness, reality of the violence.
Yeah. Fire. Like there's a fair bit of fire in this movie. And at the end, the Willem Dafoe character goes and burns down the warehouse where all the counterfeiting equipment was. And then his final confrontation with Vukovich happens there. So just the destruction of it all. Of it doesn't make you watch it and think, I'd love to be in the Secret Service, or I'd love to be a counterfeiter. That would be so cool. It's cool to watch. You don't want to be in it.
Right.
Which again seems very 80ish to me. Of let's not bullshit ourselves about what this is like. Yeah. It's harsh.
Yeah. That's great. There are no heroes in this movie, right? There's nobody where people want to say, I want to be that person. I mean, you compare that to something from a couple of years earlier, Scarface, right? Again, really, really 80s movie. Okay. And certainly when it was created was meant to make people say, oh, I don't want to be that person. But that's not the reaction that happened, right? Everybody wanted to be Tony Montana, right? Even though he dies. Even though he dies terribly, yeah.
He's been adorning posters on dorm walls ever since.
Yes. But nobody's going to have a Richard Chance poster on their wall, I think.
Or Rick Masters.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, great stuff. Certainly. The other thing I want to point out, just from an aesthetic perspective, the thing that keeps sticking in my mind, you mentioned fire and the prevalence of fire, because not only do we have Rick Masters burning his art, but at the end, he burns down his counterfeiting warehouse, okay, and ends up being consumed in flames himself. Okay, so the consumption by fire is a theme in this movie. And there are two shots. I think it's actually the same shot, the second time run in reverse. There's that orange sky with the palm trees, okay? And it's sped up because you can see the palm trees blowing really fast, and it's the sun setting behind the clouds, right? The first time it's the sun setting, and then at the end they show it again with the sun rising. And on the album cover of the soundtrack, that was the album cover, right? That picture. But again, even though it was, just a sunset and then a sunrise, it gave this feeling of everything being on fire. Okay? So I don't know. Any thoughts on, first of all, there's the very literal issues of fire in LA, but that's not what it was referring to. I think it was more something spiritual in a sense.
Which I can also see as very 8ish.
Yeah.
Of kind of the end point of lust run amok.
Yes.
The 8's desire for vitality is kind of the lust is an attempt to feel alive.
Yes.
Fire, in its own way, is alive.
Yes.
And unchecked lust consumes a person and brings about their own destruction, which is a pretty pertinent theme for type 8.
Yeah. Excellent point. I would say certainly that there is an 8ish, as you've said, an 8ish feel to this movie, right? Whether any of the characters were actually 8s or not, I don't know. Again, this is a subjective thing, right? Yeah.
And a movie can have the vibe of an Enneagram type without the protagonist or antagonist or even supporting character who is that type.
Yes.
I think this is a good example of that.
Yeah. It would be interesting to explore other examples of that on future episodes, right? Where we see that.
As I was watching this, I was trying to think of what's the equivalent to this movie in my life? And there isn't one in terms of one that was not available for a long time. But if I think of when I was 22 or thereabouts, something that came out that impacted me very strongly and that has a 4-ish vibe. And the movie that I came up with is Dead Man, Jim Jarmusch's 1995 or 96 kind of deconstruction of the Western. And I watched that not too long ago, less than a year ago, thinking the Johnny Depp character might be a 4. I don't think he is. I think he's more of a 9. I don't think Jim Jarmusch is a 4. I think he's a 5.
Right.
But the movie itself has an incredibly 4-ish feeling to it. And Similarly, it wasn't huge in its day, but it had an incredible impact on me. And it's one that I have an undying love for. And that was delightful to revisit.
Yeah.
And just to soak up that feeling, as well as to remember the 22-year-old me or 21-year-old me that was taking it in and just being, and of course, at that age, I had no knowledge of the Enneagram. But it just spoke to me on that level of like, this is where it's at.
Yeah.
Yes, please give me a world that's full of this. Hey, everybody, check this out. Oh, you don't like this? Then I don't think I respect you anymore.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, great thought. I've never seen Dead Man. I'll have to watch it one of these days. Yeah,
that makes it another parallel. Then.
Yeah. So I also have to say, again, when I think back to that time, I can't guarantee that I wasn't under the influence of something or other when I saw this movie in the theater. But so I was curious too to see how it would hold up for me, and I was not under the influence of anything this time. Those days are over. But for me, it just worked. I enjoyed watching it so much. So I'm glad we got to do this. So any closing thoughts before we wrap up, TJ?
Just to reiterate what you just said, or my take on that is just what a good feeling that is. To revisit something you loved once upon a time, to love it still, to love it even more.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, that's a way of embracing the you that was when you first saw it and honoring the part of you that's still in there, that's still that age. So yeah, a fun experience of time travel for any of us.
Covered by 40 years of gristle and muck, but that young 22-year-old is still in there somewhere.
Right. Yeah, and it's fun to taste that part of ourselves.
It was for me reliving the 80s, which was really fantastic. So, all right, great. Well, TJ, thank you for indulging me here and my my enthusiasm about an otherwise not so great movie, but listener, viewer, if you have not seen this movie, go out and watch it. It's fun. It's an artifact of a time. If you really want to know what the 80s were like, this will give it to you. So, until next time, this has been the Enneagram in a Movie. So long.